Clandestine is kept secret or done secretly in a way that is intended to hide something illicit or improper. And in real estate, we have forms that speak specifically to clandestine, which means that we may have knowledge of a house that was maybe foreclosed as a drug house. And do we have to disclose that?
Imagine moving into a meth house where they've used the tub to do that stuff and then putting your kids in there. And as soon as we walked in, I was like, this is not good. They're growing something in here. You couldn't smell it because they were keeping it. Well, I couldn't smell it. I can't smell much anyway. But as soon as I walked in, I started seeing
The Den, powered by the Lions Group, a show that explores trending topics in real estate, entrepreneurship, and personal growth. We're a small team of professionals with over $400 million in sales and nearly 2,000 successful transactions. You're listening to time-tested experts and industry leaders. Here's a refreshing look at real estate happenings and more. Welcome to The Den.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of The Den. And today we're going to be talking about clandestine. And that's a big word for hiding something that shouldn't be hidden. But before I get to that, let me introduce my friends, my partners, my co-hosts, the fellow members of the Lions Group. To my right, Paul, Hammy the Rockberry, Aspen, the Ninja Gruen, and we're missing the boss, Shannon Martin Martinez, today. And my name is Ben, Breaking Bad Lions, and here we are in New Mexico, the famous spot for Breaking Bad. Have you ever watched that full series?
No.
No? Aspen, have you?
Yeah.
I want to, but I haven't. I've seen a lot of it.
Yeah, I've seen clips of it. Pretty fascinating.
That's good.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kept getting mad though at the main guy because he had this like real sweet setup with this other guy who was all in it. And then he just got greedy and kept wanting more and more and more. And you know how that ends.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I was like, just listen to the drug dealer who knows what he's saying.
Walter?
Yeah. But Walter kept getting greedy and like wanting more and more.
Yeah.
Which just infuriated me the whole time.
You know, I watched a clip of the part where he walks in and I guess one of the guys had beat up his mule and he had like a little bomb thing that he threw in there and like blew the whole thing, including himself.
I don't remember. I watched it when it first came out. So
yeah.
This was in what, like 2017, 2015, something like that?
People come.
Maybe even earlier.
Maybe earlier?
Yeah. People come from all over to check out the location of Breaking Bad, like where they filmed it. And I think the people that bought the house
aren't super pumped about it, I heard.
Yeah, they can't even like get out of their driveway because people like still to this day block their driveway and whatnot. Fascinating. Hey, that's our claim to fame here in New Mexico. But thank goodness we share the border with Colorado and Arizona and Utah too. But clandestine is actually, let me read the definition. Clandestine is kept secret or done secretly in a way that is intended to hide something illicit. Or improper. And in real estate, we have forms that speak specifically to clandestine, which means that we may have knowledge of a house that was maybe foreclosed as a drug house. And do we have to disclose that? And why? So that's why our talking points today are geared around clandestine. It's because it could affect you as a buyer.
Well, clandestine isn't always bad. I was a clandestine operative in the military.
Ah, interesting.
So, and that was, I guess it's bad for the other guys, but
yeah,
good for us.
Yeah. So you were a clandestine operative. So are you CIA? Can I ask that? If I asked you if you were CIA, would you have to tell me?
No.
But he could tell you. I have a friend that was in the CIA and FBI, and she's not in it any longer. And she's like wrote a book on it and really interesting.
I had a top secret, a TSSCI clearance.
Wow.
That's a top you could get.
That's pretty incredible.
That you know about.
Yeah.
Well,
that's true.
For what I was doing,
Yeah. That's
at 22.
Yeah. And that was when
they shouldn't give us clearances at that age.
Yeah. Because you were doing a lot of interrogation and stuff, right? Yeah. And were you doing it over in the Middle East, right? Any interesting stories?
Not today.
All right. Okay. Back to clandestine. We actually have forms that deal with this because we have homes sometimes that are foreclosed, or sometimes people are growing marijuana, which is legal here in New Mexico, provided you have all the proper permits and things like that. But there can be repercussions with that. So, Aspen, I'm going to jump to you first. What are your What are your experiences with, let's just talk about marijuana specifically, because I think that's probably the biggest thing that most people would deal with. What are some of the things to know if you are an owner and you are growing marijuana for personal use or for distribution? How would that affect you in real estate?
There's quite a few things that it could affect. One of the biggest ones probably being the insurance factor. You're probably going to have a hard time getting insurance on the property. But something that I would know is something we don't really see here very much, which is mold. Typically, whenever you're doing any type of growing, you're going to have more humidity, which could bring mold into the house as well. Or the wiring could be different. There's a lot of different things that really could affect, specifically whenever you're talking about growing like marijuana in a house.
Yeah. And can it get into, obviously mold can get into walls and whatnot, but what about just the smell of it? I mean, people with really sensitive allergies, things like that.
I would consider that, like, if you are buying a house that had someone, I think cigarettes are more harmful to a house than smoking marijuana is, because cigarettes, just the tar in it attaches to everything. I know if I was buying a house, I could not buy a house that had been regularly smoked with cigarettes in, but I could see that even with like owning animals. If you're very, very allergic to cats, you're probably going to have to do some type of remediation or cleaning or painting or changing the flooring or something like that. If you're highly allergic to something, I would say it's probably the same with marijuana.
Hi, this is Aspen Gruen. I'm a partner at the Lions Group. We're dedicated to making your real estate experience the best it can be. If you're looking to buy or sell, go to sjcbroker.com and watch our informational video series. These videos break down the process and shed some light on buying or selling. While you're there, schedule a private consultation with one of our partners. We'd love to sit down, talk strategy, and give you a real advantage in today's market. You deserve the best, so take those steps, and we'll see you soon. Now back to the show.
Yeah, have you seen those homes where like people have smoked in it for like 20 years
and
everything's yellow?
Yeah, the streak, like it's kind of like drooling down the walls, but
gross.
You take a picture off and there is like, white behind the picture and yellow.
That's how my first house was.
Yeah.
We completely renovated it, and this was before weed was legal, and there was some weird stuff going into that house. Like there was grow pots cemented into the ground. There was a bunch of grow lights out in the sheds outside. This house was bought on auction though, so there was no disclosures or anything, but it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure out some weird stuff going on in that house.
What was happening there. Yeah. And mold, I like to tell clients, like, look, it usually takes, not all the time, but it usually takes 3 things to create mold that's going to be harmful for you. And that's one, you have to have the condition, you have to have a space that it's going to happen in. You have to have a constant water source, and you have to have like a lack of ventilation. But Paul, you could probably speak to that a little bit more, since you also do home inspections. What have you seen in regard to moldy conditions and how it can affect a property?
Well, I think before, I've seen a lot of mold in doing home inspections, but I think the one house that I saw was before weed was legal here, and before I was in inspecting. I went out to this double wide, and what they did was they put plastic up around everything. So they tried to have a
tropical
greenhouse,
environment,
a greenhouse inside the house. And as soon as we walked in, I was like, this is not good. They're growing something in here. You couldn't smell it because they were keeping it. Well, I couldn't smell it. I can't smell much anyway. But as soon as I walked in, I started seeing mold everywhere. So yeah, no ventilation, because all they did, they vented it out, but it was just a passive vent. So there was no fans or anything like that. But the humidity had gotten to the rest of the house, and it was all like wood paneling on the walls. If you had pulled that off, I bet it was mold everywhere.
I found that with the house in Durango. They were growing tropical plants inside. And I was like, this place has got to be just riddled with mold, because it was so humid in the house with no ventilation, no airflow. The same thing, they blocked off all the places where you would have airflow. I did not purchase that house.
It was like a fish tank in there.
It was like sticky as soon as you walked in.
Like you go into those amphibian
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Exhibits at
Exactly.
the
It was
we were
exactly like
just
that.
at one of those. Yeah, it was a totally different. Like you went from cool air that was you could tell was arid. You walk into like a steam room.
Well, it's like when it's really hot and you put cold water in a cup and it immediately starts to, condensation on the outside of the cup.
Yeah,
These houses are a lot like that.
yeah.
As soon as outside air comes in, everything is wet.
That's my biggest thing with growing anything inside the house is the mold.
Yeah.
To me, that's a bigger concern.
Yeah, so it's not just about the marijuana itself. It's about the repercussions of that, the conditions that you need to keep constant in the home that could affect the rest of the property. And then you're talking about sheetrock removal, treating the boards. I mean, we've seen some homes where, gosh, you just have to kind of basically gut it.
Keep going until it's not there anymore.
And then treat the boards themselves with an antimicrobial solution. Sometimes even kills.
Well, mold remediation is, everybody thinks it's just kills, but it's not, because you're just encapsulating.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even killing the mold. It's
kind of like asbestos. You're just
covering it and allowing it to eat into whatever it's on. But if you have good airflow, that's probably the best way to keep mold down.
Yeah.
So, crawl spaces, it's always good to have a fan in there. I don't know where I was going with this, but you were saying cleaning. I've seen houses where they've stripped it down to the studs, taken everything out where there was mold, and still can't get a good clean bill of health on that house.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that can be a problem because in fact, I just met with a seller yesterday that had the same issue. They cleaned all the vents, the ductwork and everything, and still had a high reading, which was pretty incredible. But back to the clandestine component. If you're growing marijuana in your property for personal use or for commercial use, what kind of issues will you face when you sell the property? And do you need to disclose that you actually had a grow house there?
So I think it would be different for commercial versus residential use, because even here, you're allowed to own a certain amount of plants. If you have 4 plants in the house, I don't think you're going to run into the same issues. Take those out before if you want to disclose it. I consider it, since it is legal now, to me, it's more like having a tropical plant. As long as it hasn't made any other issues, I don't know. I don't even know if you would really need to disclose if you were growing legally in your home.
For personal use.
Personal use.
12 plants?
I don't know how many exactly it is, but if you were following everything, you were permitted all the right. To me, that's just like having a plant that, some people might be sensitive to it, but that's also just some people are sensitive to cats.
Cats, yeah.
But as far as commercial use, you're not going to be able to get a loan on that property from a typical bank. Insurance is going to be tricky. You're going to have certain regulations when it comes to water. If you're doing any sort of fertilizer, that's especially liquid fertilizer, you're going to have to disclose that because it can get into the soil. There's a lot more for commercial than I think for personal.
And title insurance issues.
Yep.
The title company won't grant insurance in most instances on properties like that. There's a lot to think about there. And I guess, I would tend to agree with you in the sense of if you had 5 plants, and they were more like house plants, and you didn't have like a full hydroponic system set up in an enclosed space, would you really need to disclose that, you had marijuana growing for personal use? That's a gray
because it's not illicit, really. Because if it's legal and you're doing it properly, if someone is coming in that's allergic to marijuana, and we live in a place that it's illegal, they should be asking. They should say, I'm allergic to this. Have you had any plants? Do you smoke in the house? Is there? And a seller should be forthright in saying it because it is legal.
Yeah. And you always want to err on, like if it's something, I always tell my clients, like if this is something you would want to know as a buyer, then disclose it. Like that's kind of the acid test. Like if it's something you feel like you would want to know, or if you're questioning whether you should disclose or not, then you should tend to disclose it because anytime you get to that tipping point, you should try to tip on the right side.
And we're not the police. Just tell us.
Yeah.
You're not going to get arrested for telling us. Even meth is huge here. You have to disclose if there's been any meth used in the house or especially made in the house. Especially made. To me, that is completely different. Even we disclose lead-based paint. As long as you're not licking the walls, that's not something I'm personally concerned about. I would not buy a meth house personally because it can stay in the house for like 15 years. You can test positive for meth just by
being
living in
the
it.
home.
Exactly.
Yeah,
To
because
me,
it's
that's
throughout the plumbing. It's
Yeah. Talk a little bit more about that, Paul. I mean, what's your knowledge in regard to a meth house and how it can, I mean, you got to strip it down. You were saying even the plumbing.
Yeah, I mean, if you're mixing those chemicals and then you're putting it down the regular sink, if it's in a septic, I mean,
bathtub.
Bathtub, all of those things. I mean, it's very hard to wash those away with just regular water. So all those chemicals. I mean, imagine moving into a meth house where they've used the tub to do that stuff and then putting your kids in there.
Yeah.
You should know if you're going to be dealing with water that could be contaminated with those chemicals.
Yeah. Great point. And if you're buying a foreclosure, maybe you should do some digging on that.
Get a test.
Yeah, get a test or do some digging on the history of that home.
Well, and I would think anything that you don't have good disclosures from the sellers, so an auction house, a foreclosure, something like that, or anything that's suspected to be a meth house, I would get air quality samples, mold samples. Those are, even if they come back clean, it's better to have peace of mind than to have medical issues down the road.
And you're probably getting a cheaper house.
Yeah.
So spend the money and do some more
yeah.
investigation for sure.
Yeah, because if they do find positive there and you still want to move forward, you have a huge negotiating tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have some leverage there to say, look, now you know, seller, what I know. You're going to have to disclose that, whether you're dealing with a bank or whatever. You need to disclose that we have a positive reading on, methamphetamines in the home.
There's not a lot that I get pretty squeamish about in real estate. I don't mind asbestos. I don't mind lead-based paint. But radon, mold, and meth are like big things that would make me not buy the house, but I would be putting in different things. I would want the mold treated. I just know like radon, you can get a mitigation system, and none of these things are exceptionally expensive or upfront if you know.
Mm-hmm.
But if you discover that there's mold in all the walls and on the studs, and then it becomes a lot bigger issue.
Well, for the low price of the testing, I think it makes sense to know up front.
Yeah.
Especially radon is, and we're seeing it so much more than we used to. I think because we're doing more testing. Durango it's everywhere in Durango.
Mm-hmm.
Aztec, it's popping up all over the place. Farmington is hit or miss. But
in our neighborhood, there's been a lot of radon.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've gotten tested, especially with having a basement, you probably should.
Yeah, we were thinking about doing the test. In fact, I was talking to Paul about that.
Yeah, we are too.
Yeah. Just to see what's happening and if there's any issues and what we need to do. So yeah, it's a silent killer. I mean,
yeah, it's the second leading cause of lung cancer after smoking.
That's incredible. And we plan to be there for quite a few years. So,
really the systems are only a few $1,000s to get put in. Mm-hmm. As far as radon, it's a very easy, affordable, relatively fix. Yeah. Other things can be much more expensive.
Well, if you come over, you're going to have to look past my meth lab.
Don't open that bathroom door.
I'm checking for radon. You got meth lab. That's fine. Just checking for radon.
You were going to say something, though.
I forget now.
No, gosh.
Oh, but for mold can be a lot more expensive to mitigate. But I think if you have mold, that is, causes a lot of health problems too. So if you think that there's mold, get a test. It's cheap.
Yeah.
And then you could talk about the mitigation problem. If you're buying a house that has mold, just like you said, definitely that should be in the negotiations.
Yeah.
Especially where we live, since mold isn't super common, you're going to see it like under a bathroom sink. It's not super common here to be in everything unless there was a leak that wasn't, taken care of, water dripping somewhere, a broken pipe in the wall. It's pretty uncommon
Natural
here.
spring. We've had a couple natural springs and crawl spaces.
Yep.
Yeah,
crawl spaces. If there's water.
Yeah.
Exactly. But for here, we're not super humid.
Yeah.
You can normally take care of it.
So we see it mostly on houses that have irrigation, overwatering. If I see a house with a crawl space and the grass goes right up to the house, to the foundation wall, there's a good chance there's going to be mold.
Yeah.
And we find it all along the rim joist, right around those vents.
The seal plate and all that jazz.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's where to find it.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, when I grew up in Washington, and so I forget when we fly back into Seattle, sometimes I'm like, oh, there's moss on roofs. Like how random and weird that is. Well, that's how much water is up there. And we actually had the situation where when I was younger, our house burned down and we had to get like a little mobile home to live there while during that interim. And that mobile home, we didn't know, was full of mold. So me and my two brothers, we developed asthma. And my oldest brother, he had it severe. And he would go to the hospital. They would check him in, and it was like he was breathing through a straw. And they would get him better. He would come home and get sick again. And we could never figure out what was going on. But mold is a very, very dangerous thing if it's not treated and taken care of. That's one whole section of things to understand. And if you're a seller and you've had moldy conditions, please disclose. Just tell people what has happened and what has been done to cure it. And actually it can be a positive, especially if you install all of the systems, the fans, the extra ventilation, the vapor barriers, the things like that to really help, ease the mind of other people. There may be people that are hypoallergenic. And so they are looking for places that have had these extra things done. So it may be a benefit for you.
I would be happy to buy a house with a radon mitigation system.
Yeah.
Because to me, radon's not an issue in this house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a humidistat, we see those all the time. If you have a house that has, a high water table, or like my house is at the bottom of a hill, so all the grass that gets watered, I get all the moisture. So if there's humidity in the crawl space, just have that humidistat so it turns on anytime the humidity levels go up.
Yeah. That's a great thing. Set it and almost forget it. You'll hear that fan a little bit, but what a great thing to have, especially if you're very sensitive to stuff like that. Let's pivot a little bit and go to other things that may need to be disclosed. What about deaths in a home? Is that something that has to be disclosed as a real estate agent? Do you have to disclose whether people have passed away in the property?
Nope. I assume any house older than 50 years old has probably had someone pass away. Maybe in it.
Yeah.
It's not super uncommon.
What's that little red-haired doll? Annabelle?
Raggedy Ann?
No.
Yeah,
the
Annabelle.
one. Yeah,
they're creepy.
Annabelle, the one that's like the most haunted doll. And yeah. So what happens if, you know that the house is like, has had issues with haunting and doors slamming?
If there's issues, I would want to know. If you think it's an issue, I think you should disclose it.
Yeah.
I do. Like if someone got murdered in the house, I think you should probably disclose it.
So as a real estate agent, though, are you culpable? Are you liable for disclosing something that is,
No.
I think if the sellers think that they should disclose it, then they should disclose it.
Yeah.
But it's just like when we were talking before the podcast started about crime rates and stuff. We're not liable for saying this is a great area and it's a high crime area. We're supposed to direct them
to the
to
source.
websites, to places where they can find that information.
Yes, because we're not supposed to technically say this is a great area, low crime, things like that, correct? I mean, you're supposed to just say, here's the neighborhood. I mean, if you just follow the regulations to the letter, it's like, here's the neighborhood.
I've never been killed here.
Yeah. I have never seen anyone killed here, but
they can't say that. I've never been killed here.
I've never been killed.
That's something I always thought was weird. There's a few things with real estate rules I don't know if I agree with. And crime rate is a statistic that you can find with a Google search. So for me, I know that we can't disclose crime rate, but I think it's weird that we can't, because it's a search that is a statistic that we can find and give to someone. Same for saying it's across the street from a church. We cannot in New Mexico say anything about like religious because of redlining purposes. I understand why, but I would want to know if this road is going to be very busy. If I'm living right next door to a church, I don't think I would want to live there. And I would feel like I'm wasting my time to go see a house and then find out there was a church right across the street or whatever it might be, because on Sundays, you're probably going to be pretty, and maybe Wednesday nights.
Jam-packed.
There's certain things that I understand their rules and I understand kind of why they're rules, but I don't know if I necessarily, and I'll follow the rules.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Yeah. Well,
That doesn't mean you have to agree with them.
I have a situation that I'd like you guys' opinion on. I had helped a couple with a couple young kids buy a house, and then about a year, maybe 2 years into living there was a murder right across the street, and the husband witnessed the murder.
Oh, geez.
So we helped them move. Do I have to disclose? I know I don't have to disclose that there was a murder there, but
Should you
Should.
do
I don't know,
They
because
do
it could
that?
be a one-off thing. It could, I mean, most murders are personal. It probably wasn't.
Well, and I think it was a drug deal gone bad is what it was. But
Yeah,
that was the thing. I was like, I understand why we're getting out of here.
sure.
But while I list the house, should I say,
I think-
well,
If people, I mean, neighbors are going to tell them.
Yeah.
sure.
So that's one thing like neighbors are going to say. So you might as well just.
It's always the neighbor that comes up.
Mhm.
Hey, welcome to the neighborhood, Bob. Gosh, did you hear about that guy
Exactly.
across the street?
Mhm.
You know, it's always the neighbor. I think in good consciousness, if you're like, if it bothers you enough, like you would want to know. But at the same time, you have an obligation to your seller to not harm their ability to sell. So it starts to become tricky.
I feel like they could put it in the others section of, they just don't feel comfortable living there because of, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Or I would probably disclose it
Yeah.
as a seller, as a realtor.
Yeah. But as a
So what would
realtor,
be
do
the
you
advice?
harm?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you
That
harm
you
your
give them?
your seller by disclosing something that they're like, look, that's our reason, but I don't want you to talk about it because it didn't happen on this property.
I would be, if I was the realtor too, I'd be like, well, do you want them to know now? Or do you want them to know during inspections or a day before closing? Because the neighbors are probably going to talk to them.
At some point.
At some point, the neighbors are going to go over there.
Yeah.
So wouldn't you rather talk about it now?
Yeah. And I had an interesting conversation, or I had an interesting situation that plays out. We just have a couple more minutes, but I had an owner that had two properties side by side. And I've told you about this over the years. But if you don't remember, I'm going to remind you. Up in La Plata area, there was two homes side by side, and the owner he lived in one and wanted to sell the other. The other home, a lady contacted me. She said, "Look, my son's getting out of prison. He was in there for as a predator. It was a sexual predator, so he's going to be a registered sex offender." And so we disclosed that to the seller. The seller said, "Hey, look, everyone needs a second chance." She ended up buying the property to allow her son to move into that property straight out of jail. She lived there with him. However, we moved to sell his home, and a family comes in that's working with another realtor to buy that property. And I'm in a position where I'm like, I know that there's a registered sex offender literally next door, and these people have 5 kids. And I'm going, okay, what do I do? Because I don't want to harm my seller's ability to sell the property, but at the same time, I got to sleep at night, and I'm concerned about this family with these children literally next door, and there's no fence in between the houses. It was one of those things that I called the attorney, our state level attorney, and had some conversations. I would recommend that if you ever get into a situation.
What'd she say?
She basically said, you need to direct them to the online
Red Dot or whatever.
the search engine. So I very, very plainly said to the other realtor, I need you to recommend to your clients to do a search on, on this side of things, or highly recommend it for them. And so they ended up doing it, ended up buying it.
As long as everyone knows and
so
I would probably feel inclined to. And if someone recommended that to me, I'd be like, yep.
Noted.
Exactly.
That ain't going to work.
I think that's things that you should know, though, especially like if people aren't familiar with how it works, they might not even know where to look, or that they can look that up.
Sure.
Or even consider, people get so wrapped up in what they're going to do in the home, how they're going to set up the yard, all those things. They're not thinking about the neighborhood and safety and schools. And I try to bring all of those things up as things to think about.
Yeah.
Whether they do or not, it's up to them.
Yeah, because it's an exciting process, and they're thinking they got tunnel vision. Like you said, they're decorating and painting and putting up fences in their mind and landscaping. They're not thinking about the registered sex offenders.
And if I was a family and moved in and didn't look at it, we do whenever we move. But if I didn't look and then I found out, I would be very upset.
Very upset.
I'd be very upset.
Especially if it's a neighbor right next door.
And especially if I knew the realtors knew.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some liability there.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Absolutely. So interesting conversation. We went from clandestine to disclosure of things that, are gray areas. But hopefully that shed some insight to you as a buyer or a seller on how to navigate some of those channels down the road when you end up buying or selling. Think about it if you're buying, the area and the locations and other things beyond just the fun stuff. And when you're selling, of course, think about that as well. You do not have to disclose if there was a death in the property, but would you want to know that? And if your consciousness says, hey, I would want to know that, then disclose it. It's one of those things. So thank you for listening to this episode of The Den. If you like our content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Throw down some comments. If you've had a situation like this happen or play out, we'd love to hear stories from our listeners. And of course, go to sjcbroker.com and schedule private consultation with any one of the partners here at the Lions Group. We'd love to sit down with you and give you an advantage in today's market, whether you're buying or selling residential or commercial. We can give you a true advantage in today's market. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Den. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Den, powered by the Lions Group. Hit the subscribe button to keep informed and check the show notes below for direct links to our buyer and seller video series. The buyer and seller video series can give you an inside track on taking the right steps in real estate. If you'd like to learn more about the Lions Group or to schedule a consultation, go to sjcbroker.com. Complex markets require complex strategies. The Lions Group can give you a true advantage in any market. Whether you're buying or selling, residential or commercial, contact us directly at sjcbroker.com. We're time-tested experts with a client-first approach, and we'll see you next time in The Den.